One thing we have done very little over the past decade or so on this show is talk to self-help experts about their theories and books. But this one line hooked me.
We are not put on earth to be happy every single second of every day.
Today on The Best of Our Knowledge, we'll go looking for happier and explore the process of organizing the search. We'll also spend an academic minute setting other realistic goals. I'm Bob Barrett, and this is The Best of Our Knowledge. What makes you happy? It's a question that has an unlimited number of answers, but the real question should probably be what makes you happier. That's the one that Randye Kaye asks in her new book called Happier Made Simple. In the book, she asks questions and offers some guidance, but not to find total happiness, but to find ways to find a bit of happier. Randye Kaye is an author, broadcaster, and actress, and just for full disclosure, she and I have worked together on some podcast projects over the years. We spoke about this project last week and asked why she took a deep dive into Happier.
So Happier Made Simple, like my first book, is a book that was 10 years in the marinating in my head. I wrote a book about 10 years ago, which, as many writers will tell you, had to be written, and it just went through me and into my fingers. And that book, Ben Behind His Voices, was about my family's experience with my son's schizophrenia. Subtitle, One Family's Journey from the Chaos of Schizophrenia to Hope. I had written things before, but this was a full-fledged book. And once it got published by Rowman and Littlefield, I was asked on a speaking tour, and I spoke to a lot of international and national audiences. And the question I kept getting was, how do you stay so positive? And the two comments I kept getting were, I can't believe you're talking about this. It happened to me too, but I've been ashamed. And also, I can't believe you made me laugh about this. Those comments meant a lot to me. And the question meant a lot to me too. How do you stay so positive? Look, I am not a Pollyanna, but people have said to me pretty often that I have a positive energy, and that some even said, they go, what would Randye do? So I guess my attitude has an effect on some people. I hope so. I cry my share of tears, don't get me wrong. But I decided to think about that question and answer it. And in doing so, I started studying the self-help, happiness movements and books. And I kept looking on bookshelves, buying some books, browsing others, and opening them up and going, I can't even get through this book. It's like an 8-point font, and it's too much theory. And in doing my research, I found that most people buy a self-help book, read a chapter and a half, if that much, and put it back on their shelf, like they'll get the message through osmosis. So I thought, how can I frame things that I do that's just quick and easy and gets to the point very quickly? And I started doing presentations called Happier Made Simple, specifically happier, not happiness, because let's get real. And I boiled down the things that I say to myself to frame the things that happen to me. And I boiled them down to 7 core phrases assigned to 7 core concepts that spell out the word breathe. And breathing itself is quite important. And with that framework, people kept saying, you should write a book about this. And finally, I had the time and I did it.
I want to go into your subtitle first and then go back to something you just said. You said part of your subtitle is choose your words. And it seems like you were very, very careful choosing happier instead of happiness. Explain.
Absolutely. So I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in the quote happiness movement. And mainly it comes down to this. There are people who feel that the goal is to be happy all the time. Of course, they admit that that goal will never be reached. But I, along with other people who have coined a phrase I love called toxic positivity, we posit that happiness all the time is not even a goal we should aspire to. It reminds me of a Twilight Zone episode, if you ever watch the marathons on New Year's Day, of someone who thinks he's supposed to go to the bad place and he finds himself in the good place. And to coin the rephrasing of heaven and hell from another series, and everything is going great for him all the time. He's happy all the time. And then he's sick of it. And he finally says to his guardian angel, please just send me to the other place. And he said, you are in the other place. Because happiness every single second of every single day gives us no contrast, gives us nothing, no yardstick, nothing to measure it by. We are not put on earth to be happy every single second of every day. We are here to experience life, the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs. And there's not one person I know who hasn't had stuff happen to them that on some level they wish hadn't happened. But we can become happier by what we tell ourselves about the things that happen to us. So that's why happier. I wanted to make it really clear that this isn't a book about happiness all the time. And I don't want anybody to feel guilty if they're, I'm not happy today, or I'm not happy in this moment. It's not about happiness. It's about happier. And so I did choose that word very carefully.
Well, you spoke about 7 core phrases, so let's get into it. What are those 7 core phrases that make up the core of this book?
It spells out breathe. B is for being, and the phrase is be here now. That's something that helps me. And you can rephrase it, but these were R for reality. It is what it is. E for engagement. We're all connected. That's good to remember with the supply chain right now. A for appreciation. This is good. Just saying this is good, walking into your bathroom that needs wallpaper and going, I may get to it eventually, but right now I like it. This is good. T for trust. This is a huge one. All will be well. And that's just about expanding your brain to the bigger picture. There's a whole thing about faith and trust in that chapter. H for humor. As a former radio morning personality, I know that tragic stories are very, not tragic, let's just say inconvenient stories where I'm stupid. They're very funny on the radio the next day. So humor helps me a lot. And E for esteem. This helps me sleep. Whatever happens, I'll handle it somehow. So those are the 7 core phrases, and I frame them all through a story. And I hope that it'll give readers something quick. They can switch in the way they think to just make the moments better. And then you add up more happier moments and you get a happier day.
Is this a solitary thing? Is this something that you can just, sit in a room and do by yourself? Or does this, to quote another book, take a village?
I think everything takes a village. And I recognize that there is a spectrum of introversion to extroversion. I happen to be high on the E side. I have a brother who is a little higher on the I side. But I honestly feel that we all need each other. And so, yes, the first 7 chapters of the book are about self-talk. And it's what you tell yourself about what happens to you. And then the last few chapters are like, okay, let's branch this out to what you say to other people and so forth. It is a solitary inner process, just the way we filter things. But I'm very clear that engagement is an important part of being happier. My chapter 3, engagement, and the core phrase there is we're all connected. Just walking through life and just saying that, reminding yourself we're all connected, can increase your level of happier. For instance, I don't know if you ever watched the series Lost, where the plane crashes and they're all on this island and they're all different. I mean, you look at that, or you look on the bridge on Star Trek, you look at any place where people are thrown together by circumstance. and they end up being bonded and they end up being connected by the circumstance. On Lost, they were people who may never have been connected in real life, but they were connected on that desert island. So ever since that, if I walk into an elevator, I go, if this elevator broke down, I'd have to become really good friends with all these people really fast, and it just that thought helps me have more empathy toward all the people on that elevator. And that makes me happier for that elevator ride. So it is the first 7 phrases. I'm very clear that this is not advice to give to someone else. Bob, have you ever had someone say, "Oh, just look on the bright side"?
Annoyingly, yes.
Yes, annoyingly. And that's part of toxic positivity when we start assuming other people need our advice on how to be positive. This is your own self-talk. And then if you are a little bit happier, your mood will do the lifting of the energy of the room. But giving other people unsolicited advice, and I know this very well as a fairly new grandma, I almost never, I'm not perfect, give unsolicited advice to my daughter and her husband about parenting because it's their kids. I will sometimes say, "Are you open to any feedback about that?" And I'll get a yes occasionally, and sometimes I'll get a no, and I'll just be quiet because you don't want to say to someone else, "Oh, it is what it is," or, "Oh, this is good," or it's not advice for others. It's advice to yourself to make you stronger and happier and more able to be perhaps a role model for others.
You talk about getting away from snap judgments.
Mm.
To me, that's like, how can we disconnect from a first impression?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if it's the title of the chapter, but I coin it in my speeches and I say unsnap your judgment, because when you unsnap your judgment, that leaves you room for blank space to receive what is the truth. We have 2 halves of our brain, and I am not a scientist, obviously, but in each chapter, I realize some of my readers might want the science. So there is a section in each chapter after I tell my story and say the phrase and encourage people to try the phrase on themselves and see what happens. Then I throw in some science. And part of what I talk about are the different parts of the brain. We have the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and we have the inner brain, and we have the frontal cortex, which is more about logic. And there's a lot of parts of the brain working together. Part of our brain, more of the primitive part, but also the part that has to navigate through the world, it's that brain's part to put pieces together and help us make predictions. Oh, I hear a car coming. It might run the red light. I better be careful crossing the street. Like, these are good things. And our brain makes bridging associations. We see one thing, we think about another thing. So if we see red, we might think danger. That's a good thing. However, if you've had a few questionable experiences with noisy teenagers, you might encounter some noisy teenagers and immediately think, "Oh, they're trouble." Well, they may not be trouble. They might be joyous. They might be theater kids on their way to the cast party. Like, the snap judgments that we make based on past experience can sometimes be inaccurate, or at the very least, just what we see with our own blinders on. And so I did spend some years as a trainer for the Anti-Defamation League. And boy, did the intensive training there open my eyes to how many snap judgments I was still making, even though I consider myself very open to differences of people. I realized, boy, I still had some work to do. And if I look at someone and make a part of my brain wants to, because habit dies hard, make a snap judgment because of the shoes they're wearing, or because of how messy they are, or because of how they're yelling at their children, or whatever, I stop and question the snap judgment. And I remember we're all connected. And there are other phrases that help as well. And then my favorite phrase is, "Isn't that interesting?" And I can look at it and go, "Wait a minute. I wonder why she's yelling at her kids. I wonder why that driver in front of me, the light turned green and she didn't go." And my snap judgment part of my brain wants to go, "Oh, well, clearly they're an idiot." But I stop myself and go, "Wait a minute, there might be another reason." And then you can open the space to think, maybe that person's baby is crying and they have to find the bottle. And then suddenly the mother in me is like, oh, fine, I can wait for another cycle to the next green light. So unsnapping your judgment, realizing that you're making a snap judgment where you're filling in the gaps based on your own blinders. If you realize that, you're aware of that, then it opens to change and space. And you might be able to say, maybe even though I'm sitting next to a baby on the plane, maybe that baby won't cry just because the last one did. Maybe this one won't. And you can open the space to be empathetic, to be understanding, or to at least be curious about the other person and give them a chance.
Still to come, our conversation with Randi Kay continues with a look at some of the science behind her theories. That's next on The Best of Our Knowledge. Got any questions or comments about The Best of Our Knowledge? Send them in. Our email address is knowledge@wamc.org. And if you'd like to listen to this or any past programs again, you can find them online at our flagship station's website. Just go to wamc.org and click on the programs link. And while you're there, subscribe to the Best of Our Knowledge's podcast or download the WAMC radio app to listen on demand, anytime, any place. This is The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Bob Barrett, and our guest is Randi Kay, author of the new book called Happier Made Simple. Earlier, Randi said she looked for the science behind some of her theories, so I asked where she looked to get that science.
So Google is a very good friend.
Yes, it is.
Obviously, but I did find some studies and I read the studies. But I tried to reference mostly things that I had a little deeper understanding of because I had read the entire book or I had gone to a presentation by that person. But on occasion, I just found a study and said, this explains it really well, and I connected to it. Like, for instance, toxic positivity. Once I heard that phrase, I'm like, well, I have to find out where it comes from. And I think it's David Kessler, a grief expert, who threw that in. Because the last thing you want to do to someone who's grieving is say, oh, it happened for a reason, or, oh, you'll be fine, or you'll feel better tomorrow. Like, those things may be fine to tell yourself, but they're really, anybody who's been in grief or who's dealing with a problem will tell you that that's kind of unwanted advice. I do, after the 7 chapters of the 7 core phrases, I do get into a smattering of some things that are better to say to other people. And there are many good resources about that. So I always point people to resources about say this, not that. But I did Google on occasion. I did some interviews with people. I'm an audiobook narrator also. So sometimes I narrated an audiobook that I thought, oh my God, this works so perfectly with my book. So for instance, I referenced Donna Cameron's book about kindness. And I talk about kindness in my book. And obviously, since I had interviewed her for an hour, I had a pretty good idea of the research she had done. So I'm not a scientist, but I play one in my book. And I clearly give the credit to the people who did the science.
When you take your own experiences in life, and that's, nobody knows that better than you, how do you make the connections? How do you connect what happened to you to happier?
So that's a really good question. And I think we all have our ways of coping. And the difference that I wanted to make was, let me boil it down to 7 core phrases. And each phrase has a story that goes with it, but these are interchangeable phrases. So I'll give you an example. I have 2 children, and my older child, who I call Ben for media purposes because he doesn't want me to use his real name, has schizophrenia. And that is a kind of grief that is different from death grief, but very deep because you do lose the child you thought you had and you gain a different kind of child. Now, every parent goes through that to some extent. You thought your kid wanted football and he wants to take a ballet class. Like, we all have to adjust our hopes and dreams as parents. That's the truth. But there are degrees. Everything is a spectrum. For me, having a child with a serious mental illness for which there is no cure means a life that is a game of chutes and ladders. And we all do that, but you can go from a child with full-time work to a child 5.5 months in the psych ward in a heartbeat. So there's a phrase, you're only as happy as your happiest child. And I have tried to refute that in my own head. I need to. I cannot be an unhappy person because my child didn't turn out the way I hoped when he was in my womb. That is just, what I had. And what that boiled down to for me is the phrase R for reality. It is what it is. Now, I didn't make this up. And it is what it is, again, could be really bad when you say it to somebody else. But if you say it to yourself at the right time, it's acceptance too and reality. Do I wish my child didn't have schizophrenia? You bet I would. If I had a magic wand, I'd be waving it like crazy. But I don't have the magic wand. And so when it comes down to it, and we're in a situation, if I say to myself, all right, you may wish it to be different, but right now it isn't, and it is what it is, it almost always leads me to now what? Now what do I do realistically? And so am I going to spend time moaning and groaning and complaining and whining? No, it's not going to help anything. There's a difference between helpful anxiety and unhelpful anxiety. So it is what it is, leads me through that serenity prayer of determining what I can change, what I can't change, trying to know the difference and doing what I can. So if I need to call the police, I call the police. But if he's in the hospital and my only choice is, am I going to cry about it 24/7, or am I going to enjoy the time where someone else is taking care of him? I choose option B because it is what it is. So my choice that's left is to take care of myself while I can. So that really helps me a lot. Acceptance doesn't always mean approval. I can accept the reality of life. Doesn't mean I love it all the time, but it is what it is. So once I sorted through that, I said, well, that's the phrase. That's the phrase that calms me down sometimes and keeps me from going down the rabbit hole of self-pity and all those things that aren't helpful.
In the end, what do you hope readers take from this book? And conversely, what do you realistically expect they can get from it?
Well, I can't speak for other people, so I'm going to speak through the words that prior readers told me. What I hope they get is that it isn't just what happens to you, it's what you tell yourself about what happens to you. Again, that's not a new concept. I didn't come up with any original concepts. I have things from Aristotle in here, but the stories and the framework through which you give this guidance can make a difference. That's what makes each of us authentic and unique in the way we present things. So I hope that the reader can go, oh, you know what? This book looks easy to read. This is a book I might actually finish. This is a book I can skip around and go to the chapter I need most first. And oh, here's something I can try right away and see if it works for me. And if it does work, then I'll read on. I want the reader to be able to say, today, I'm going to work on saying to myself, be here now. I must say be here now to myself 10 times a day, and it makes my day sweeter. So I want to give them actionable phrases that if they can become your habit, you'll get more sleep. You'll have better relationships with other people. You can tell a story through the filter of poor me, please feel sorry for me. Or you can tell a story through I'm so happy and I'm so lucky. And I don't really like the word blessed myself because to me, it implies selection that you're better than someone. And that's just my interpretation of the word. So I don't use blessed, but I like to use lucky. I like to use, words that just describe how I feel. And so I could tell you, oh God, poor me. I was crossing the street and this stupid woman came. She was 84. She had no reason driving and she probably was distracted and she hit me and I fell down and I broke my leg and I broke my arm and I was in a cast and I couldn't write for 6 weeks. And do you want to sit next to me on a plane if I tell it that way? I could also tell it, oh man, I was so lucky that day. I was crossing the street and just in the nick of time, I saw this car like barreling toward me, even though I was in the crosswalk and I had looked and I ran and I didn't quite make it. But you know what? I didn't die. And I got enough out of the way that she only hit my leg. I only broke my wrist and injured my leg. And I didn't need surgery. I'm so lucky. And the ambulance came right away. I was so fortunate that day. Same story, different filter. And that is something that I think about a lot in terms of it's self-talk. What do you tell yourself about the things that happen? It's a lighthearted book. It's easy to read. And I hope that it'll give readers something quick. They can switch in the way they think to just make the moments better. And then you add up more happier moments and you get a happier day.
Again, the name of Randi Kaye's new book is Happier Made Simple. You can learn more at happiermadesimple.com. Well, setting realistic goals seems to be the topic of the day, so let's also make it the topic of today's Academic Minute.
Having vague goals makes them even harder to reach. I'm Dr. Lynn Pascarella, President of the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and today on the Academic Minute, Joan Dickson, Associate Professor of Psychology at Edith Cowan University, determines how to stay on track.
Have you stuck to your New Year resolution this year? If not, join the club. Despite our best intentions, most of us have given up by now. Recent research conducted with colleagues investigated whether personal goal processes promote mental well-being and sticking to one's most important New Year resolution. 182 adults took part in an online survey. We found 2/3 of participants abandoned their New Year resolution within the first month. Just over half pursued the same or similar resolution as in the previous year. More than half the resolutions focused on either diet or exercise. Most of the listed resolutions were described in vague terms such as to get fit. And personal goal flexibility predicted increased well-being over time, but not stickability. We may give up our resolutions because we are too vague in how we set them. Setting specific resolutions, including features such as time and place, provide mental cues to assist resolution pursuit. For example, to go for a 30-minute beach walk with my friend every Monday and Wednesday morning versus to get fit. Also, linking one's New Year resolution to more meaningful values is likely to assist. For example, the resolution to lose 5 kilos will more likely endure in the face of setbacks if it's linked to higher personal values such as beliefs about one's health or appearance. Importantly, we found the ability to flexibly adapt one's resolutions in response to changing situations is associated with promoting one's well-being.
That was Joanne Dickson of Edith Cowan University. You can find this, other segments, and more information about the professors at academicminute.org.
The Academic Minute is a production of WAMC, Northeast Public Radio, in partnership with the Association of American Colleges and Universities. That's all the time we have for this week's program. If you'd like to listen again, join us online at our flagship station's website. Go to WAMC.org and click on the programs link. And while you're there, subscribe to our podcast or any of the other WAMC or National Productions podcasts. And if you have any questions or comments about the program, send them in. Our email address is knowledge@WAMC.org. And you can find us on Twitter at TBOOKnowledge. I'm Bob Barrett. Be sure to join us next time for another edition of The Best of Our Knowledge.
Bob Barrett is producer of The Best of Our Knowledge. Dr. Alan Chartock is executive producer. The Best of Our Knowledge is a production of WAMC Radio's National Productions, which is solely responsible for its content. Hear more at WAMC.org.